Okay, let's get started on 4.3, and we're going to start looking at slope-intercept form, which is graphing lines. So like we did last time, I did go over this a little bit, so this should be pretty quick in terms of what we're going to be learning. So first thing, what are parameters? Parameters are really just a variable. So we have a couple of parameters in an equation. We have y equals mx plus b. Y and x are our parameters. Our constants are m and b. So what's really important is, of course, when we're looking at these, so our variables being x and y, and our constants being m and b, these are constant values, meaning they have one value and they never change, but x and y can both change. So that's when we look at those parameters. Slope-intercept form is exactly what I have written up at the top there. If you recall, m is equal to the slope, and that is how fast the line goes up or down or doesn't go up or down, depending, of course, on what the line is. And then b is what is known as the y-intercept. So that is what we have for both of those, and that's how we define them. And the slope, what's really important is that, remember that we have those changes, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is also equal to the slope. Okay, so notice it's the change in the y's over the change in the x's. All you have to do is always remember that y's go on top, x's go on bottom, and then what's also important, of course, from the last section is that these two must be one point, and then these two must be another point, and they have to be in that order, or you can reverse them, but then both the x's and the y's have to follow each other. So you have to be really careful with that. And then a constant function is just, for example, if I have f of x equals just some number, in this case it would probably be b, because that would be my y-intercept. So it would be just a straight horizontal line. Okay, and it's going to go through, of course, whatever that value is right there of b, and everywhere it's going to go through that particular point on the y. Okay, and then what is an interval? An interval, let's say that I want to figure out, okay, what's the function doing between two x values? So let's say I have a function, and let's say over here I have -2, and over here I have +3, and I have a line that goes through the entire over the graph, right? Remember, those arrows means it continues on forever. But let's say that I really want to find out what's happening between this point right here and this point right here. So my interval would be -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. Remember that this means that x is between those two values. So we want to know what's happening from that point up to this point. So we would be focused on the line that goes in between those two points there. Notice that we have -2 on the x there, and we have +3 on the x there, and we can see, okay, what's happening to the function in between those two particular points. Okay, and then also we need to know what is the y-intercept. We can look at all those different equations wherever it crosses the y-axis. So here we have another function. Wherever it crosses the axes, that is the y-intercept. Now there's also an x-intercept, but that's not part of the slope-intercept form. If you remember up here that b is the y-intercept. Okay, so that takes care of the definitions there. So let's take care of, so we've talked about all those different definitions. We're going to go through and look at a few things while we start writing some of these equations down. So I went through a lot of these different rules. I just want you to kind of see things. Notice here is an equation. We can see that the slope is the number in front of the x. The y-intercept, of course, is the value over here. So this would be my slope. This would be my y-intercept right here. And you can see that it runs through the point 0, 7, 7 being the y-intercept. Remember that whenever we're writing a point on a graph, it has to have an x value and a y value. And right at that point, x is 0 because x is 0 right there. And then we go up 7. So that means the y is 7 at that point. And so that's what we have for those. So let's move on to the next one. So we're going to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So we are given a slope of 5/8 and a y-intercept of 3. And so if we go over and look at those, and a y-intercept of 3, I just want to make sure I'm on the right one. So here we have this particular problem. I want to make sure that's the right one. It is. We have a slope of this one, so we know that the equation is y equals mx plus b. This should be pretty straightforward. All we have to do is just write y equals 5/8x plus 3. What is 3? That's my y-intercept. What is 5/8? That's my slope. What does that mean to do? That means to go up 5 and to the right 8. Remember that if the number is negative, if this value is negative, then we would go down whatever this number is and still right to the 8. Remember, no matter what, this goes up or down based on the positive or negative. This always goes right. Just if you always do it that way, you'll never have to worry about the signs. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So we have now rewriting linear equations in slope-intercept form. So we have, what is the slope-intercept form of 18x minus 3y? So what we have to do is we have to look at this equation and solve it for y. So here is our equation. What we want to do is we want to solve it for y. So what I need to do is I need to get the y all by itself. And so we're going to subtract 18x from both sides. And so, of course, those two cancel. So we get negative 3y equals negative 18x minus 27. Now notice, I could have done minus 27 minus 18x. It means the same thing. But remember that the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So you can see that the x value usually comes first. So it's easier to remember that way for now. If you want to write it the other way, I will not consider it wrong. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide out the negative 3 because it is multiplying. Remember, when we add or subtract, we add or subtract to both sides. If we are dividing or multiplying, we multiply or divide by everything. So of course these two cancel. Y equals negative 18 divided by negative 3. That becomes positive 6. And then negative 27 divided by negative 3 is positive 9. So the answer would be y equals 6x plus 9. So notice here, if I were to type in a 6 here and a 9 here, should get the right answer. Okay, and that's what we have for that one. So that's how we go through and we solve those types of problems. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So if we go on to the next one, we go right to the check. Actually, we're done with this part and we can move on to the second half of the lesson.